Sisters disappeared after a storm. 8 months later, a pilot spotted something on a restricted island. Before we start, please help me get to 1,000 subscribers. And right where are you watching this video from? Rachel Monroe had never liked the ocean. It reminded her of how unpredictable life could be, how one wave could change everything. But that morning, she made peace with it. She stood barefoot on the warm sands of Second Beach, a quiet stretch near Port St. John's, South Africa, holding a small urn to her chest. The ashes of her late husband, Michael, caught the golden light as the sun climbed lazily over the Indian Ocean. Behind her, her daughters, Lily and Sophie, giggled as they chased each other through the tide pools. Lily, the older of the two at 10, was fiercely protective of her little sister. Sophie, just 8, was all laughter and questions. They had Michael's smile. Rachel watched them, her heart breaking and healing at the same time. This trip wasn't just about scattering ashes. It was about moving forward, about reconnecting as a family, even if one piece was missing. As Rachel stepped toward the water, she said a few soft words, a goodbye, a promise, a prayer. The wind picked up gently, then sharply. She turned. The clouds, once high and white, had begun to roll into gray masses, darkening with each second. A sudden gust blew her sun hat down the shore. "Girls," she called out, shielding her eyes. "Let's pack up, it's about to rain." No answer. Rachel glanced back toward the cove. The girls had disappeared behind a rock outcrop about 5 minutes ago, chasing after a crab. She had seen them skip into the narrow inlet just before she began the small ceremony. They knew not to go far. They always stayed close. Still holding the urn, she hurried down the beach. "Lily? Sophie?" Her voice trembled against the rising wind. Thunder cracked, low and distant. Sand swirled at her feet. The surf roared louder. She reached the cove and froze. Empty. No giggles. No footprints. Just a wet patch of sand and seaweed where the tide had come in higher than before. "Girls!" Her heart pounded. She climbed the rocks. The other side of the cove opened up into a small beach, but it was vacant. She ran to shoreline, scanning for signs. Towels, sandals, their small pink backpack. Nothing. Rain began to fall, soft at first, then harder. Within minutes, the sky opened up completely. Rachel screamed their names into the wind. The hours that followed were a blur of desperate phone calls, shouting at indifferent emergency responders, and stumbling through every dune, every tide pool, every path leading into the nearby coastal bush. Local volunteers joined in. A rescue team arrived by sundown, scouring the shoreline with flashlights and dogs. Helicopters were called. Boats dispatched. Nothing. No screams. No clothing. No bodies. Just the ocean, endless and impassive. By the second day, news cameras appeared. Tragedy at Second Beach. The headlines read, "Storm may have swept away 2 sisters." Rachel stood outside the local police station, wrapped in a wet blanket, giving statements through sobs. She repeated the same things. They never went far. They were strong swimmers. She turned away for only a moment. But the storm had arrived fast and fierce. Locals called it the worst coastal squall in years. Rogue waves, unpredictable currents. Still, something fell off. A local fisherman mentioned seeing a boat near the cove shortly before the storm hit. Another swore he heard crying from the cliffs above the beach, but assumed it was seagulls. Theories swirled. Maybe the girls had wandered inland. Maybe they were taken. The case gripped the nation. Rachel never left Port St. John's. She rented a small flat above a cafe and made it her mission to plaster every pole and market stall with her daughters' faces. She walked the beach every morning at sunrise, watching the tides, listening for their voices. She didn't believe they were dead. She couldn't. The airport at Mthatha wasn't large, but it was alive with movement. Technicians wheeling crates, tourists squinting at outdated arrival boards, and pilots grabbing coffee between flights. Rachel Monroe stood near the bulletin board by the entrance, holding a printed flyer in both trembling hands. The paper was worn now, its edges soft from weeks of reposting. Two faces smiled out from it, Lily and Sophie, frozen in time. "Can I hang this here?" she asked the woman at the desk, her voice barely above a whisper. The clerk hesitated, then gave a soft nod. "Try to use the lower half, love. Management's picky." Rachel pinned the flyer beneath one advertising whale watching tours. She stepped back, looked at it, adjusted the edges, then stared. "Please, someone has to recognize them." Behind her, a man in a flight jacket watched, holding a paper cup of steaming rooibos tea. His name was Darren Blake, a former military pilot turned regional contractor. He had flown in every kind of weather, over every kind of terrain. Nothing rattled him. Until now. He took a few cautious steps toward her. "Excuse me," he said gently. "Those girls. I just saw that photo." Rachel turned, the strain written deep in her face. She gave a polite nod, expecting another empty offer of prayers. Darren reached into his jacket pocket and unfolded a crumpled flight map. "You said their names were Lily and Sophie?" Rachel blinked. "Yes. You know them." He hesitated, measuring her. "I don't know them. But yesterday, I was ferrying a group of technicians to a radar site north of here. Had to cut east around a nasty system. That put me over the stretch of water near Shark Rock Island." Rachel stiffened. "That island's off limits. It's private, right?" "Exactly. And officially uninhabited." Darren tapped the map. "But as I passed over, I saw something that didn't make sense. On the southern beach, there were two girls, standing near the tree line. One of them was waving, I swear it. Both of them were barefoot. Looked like they'd been there a while. The room around them fell away." Rachel's voice came out raw. "Did you land?" "I couldn't," he said. Weather turned. Heavy cloud rolled in out of nowhere. Visibility dropped to nothing. By the time I circled back, the island was shrouded." Rachel stared at him, every cell in her body tightening. "Why didn't you report it?" "I did," he said, almost defensively, "to the Port Authority. But it's a gray zone. Shark Rock belongs to a holding company. They claim they bring people out for research, sometimes for private getaways. Nobody wants to touch it." Rachel felt as if the floor had shifted beneath her. "You're telling me my daughters are on that island, and no one's doing a damn thing?" "I'm telling you," Darren said carefully, "that I saw someone. Two girls. They looked about the right age. It's enough to go check. But I can't just fly over it again without clearance." Rachel shook her head. "Then we'll find another way." There was a pause. Darren's eyes met hers. Something unspoken passed between them. Loss, urgency, resolve. "Tell me everything," she said. And he did. The police station sat at the edge of town, a squat concrete building with sun-warped shutters and a rusted flagpole. Inside, the air was thick with heat and the slow grind of bureaucracy. Rachel Monroe stood at the front desk gripping a file of evidence. A printed flight map, Darren's signed statement, and a most recent photo of Lily and Sophie. Her heart thudded like a drum. The officer behind the desk, Sergeant Langa, scanned the pages without much interest. He was polite, but weary-eyed, clearly used to distraught visitors and unlikely claims. "I understand your concern, ma'am," he said, sliding the documents back across the counter. "But Shark Rock Island is private, leased to the Garrow Syndicate for environmental research. They've got permits, staff rotation. Sometimes they bring family. We've had no formal complaints." Rachel leaned in, voice sharp. "Then let's make one now. A pilot saw two young girls waving from a beach. There shouldn't be children on an uninhabited research island." Sergeant Langa sighed, lowering his voice. "Look, I don't make the rules. That island, it's complicated. The syndicate keeps everything under wraps. High-level connections. They don't like people sniffing around." Rachel felt a chill behind her eyes. "So what? Because they're rich, they're above a missing persons investigation. We've already coordinated with search and rescue. Marine patrols swept the area weeks ago. That was before the sighting." Rachel shot back. My daughters could be alive on that island right now. The officer stiffened. Even if we wanted to send someone, we'd need authorization from the landowners. That takes time. Paperwork. Lawyers. She could hear the door slamming shut in his tone. Rachel didn't flinch. I'll get you authorization. Lenga gave a dry smile. Then come back with it. Rachel stood outside the station, numb with anger. The late afternoon sun painted everything in orange, but her thoughts were gray with disbelief. She had given them everything: a trained pilot's testimony, a precise location, a plausible lead. And still, the wall remained. She didn't wait another second. Back at the airfield, she found Darren Blake leaning against the wing of his single-engine plane, arms crossed, talking with a mechanic. He turned as he saw her approaching. His face tightened as he read her expression. "They won't go," she said. "They're protecting the island." Darren muttered a curse under his breath. Didn't think they'd play it straight. That syndicate's got a web around this place. "I want to go there," she said. "With or without them." Darren hesitated, clearly weighing something heavy. "Even if I could fly over it, I'd risk losing my license. If they catch us landing without clearance, it's trespassing." Rachel stepped closer, her voice low and urgent. "What if it were your child?" Darren looked down, jaw clenched. "I have fuel. I have flight plans no one checks too closely. I can take you within a few miles, maybe give you a visual, low and slow. But we can't land. Not yet." She nodded. "Then take me up." That night, while the rest of the town settled into dinner and sleep, Rachel packed a bag with binoculars, a voice recorder, and her daughter's last school photo. She didn't know what she would see. She didn't know what waited on that island. But she was done waiting for permission. The next morning, at first light, a single-engine plane lifted off from the tarmac and turned east toward the island where the waves whispered secrets, and two small figures had once waved into the sky. The bar was half empty, thick with the scent of fried fish and old varnish. Ceiling fans spun slowly overhead, creaking with every turn. Rachel sat alone at a corner table with a glass of warm cola, her eyes fixed on the open journal in front of her. She had jotted every detail from her flight with Darren: the exact position of the island, the shape of the coastline, the flicker of a white object she swore could have been cloth. Still no confirmation. Still no answers. She didn't look up when the chair across from her scraped against the floor. "I hear you've been asking the kind of questions that get folks watched," came a low, rasped voice. She glanced up. An older man, deeply suntanned, sat down uninvited. His posture was relaxed, but there was a steeliness in his eyes that made her pause. His hands bore the weathered lines of someone who had lived outdoors: scars, burns, calluses. A thin ranger's badge hung from a faded leather cord around his neck. "Elias Mabuto," he said, "used to work coastal conservation around those islands. Before they changed hands." Rachel's breath caught. She'd heard the name from Darren, an ex-park ranger who knew the waters better than anyone. "I was told you might know something," she said cautiously. He nodded, eyes scanning the room as if checking for listening ears. "Shark Rock Island. Quiet place, long time. But 5 years ago, that changed. A group of private men showed up. Not scientists. Not tourists. Armed. Didn't answer to local Marine Patrol, either." Rachel leaned forward, hanging on his words. "Did you report it?" Elias gave a bitter laugh. "I tried. The file got closed faster than it opened. Official word was private development, temporary operation. But they weren't building anything. They were guarding." He took a sip from the bottle of beer he'd brought with him, then wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "One evening, I saw a boat heading out from Port Whale, no lights. Around midnight, I watched it through my scope. 2 girls, maybe 12, 13, huddled near the stern. They didn't look like tourists. They looked taken." Rachel's skin went cold. "You're sure? I've seen fear before. This was that." He paused. There were rumors about what the island's really used for. Not just hiding people. Hiding the kind of people others pay to forget. Runaways. Witnesses. Even stolen children. She was silent, fists clenched on the table. No one speaks up, Elias added, because those who do disappear in different ways. Rachel met his eyes, tears brimming. Why are you telling me this now? Because you're the first one who didn't look away. You're still here, every day. Most people drop a few flyers, light a candle, and leave. He reached into his pocket and placed a pair of old binoculars on the table. From the cliff at Turtle's Point, you can see Shark Rock on a clear morning. Not close, but close enough to catch movement. She took them silently, hands trembling. As he stood, Elias added one final warning, voice low and grim. This isn't just about two missing girls, Miss Monroe. This is about the money that keeps mouths shut and the people who feed it. If your daughters are out there, you're not just up against nature. You're up against the kind of silence that's bought. The climb to Turtle's Point was brutal. Sharp stones underfoot, thick thorn brush along the trail, and the air hot with midday haze. Rachel pressed forward, Elias Mabuto just ahead, his silhouette framed by the broken sunlight slashing through acacia trees. He moved with the confidence of someone who knew every ridge, every shadow. Almost there, he muttered. Rachel's legs ached, but she didn't slow down. Not now. At the summit, a forgotten wooden hunting tower stood among the trees, leaning but intact. It had once been used for bird surveys and game tracking before the region was privatized. No one came up here anymore. Elias gestured to the ladder. Binoculars are up top. You'll want a steady hand. Rachel climbed, her fingers sweating against the worn wood. The platform creaked under her weight, but she dropped to her knees and crawled toward the covered viewing slit. A dusty case lay beneath a faded tarp. Inside, military-grade binoculars, coated with fine red dust. She steadied herself and raised them to her eyes. The ocean gleamed in the distance. Farther out, like a bruise against the blue, loomed Shark Rock Island. To the untrained eye, it was nothing, a jagged crescent wrapped in reef. But Rachel's heart pounded as she scanned the southern curve of the beach. At first, nothing. Then, movement. A white yacht, anchored just off the shoreline. Not large, but sleek, too polished for research, too private for transport. She adjusted the lens. Two figures on the deck. Small. One sitting, the other standing, her arms wrapped around herself. Their hair was tangled, clothes dirty. Their limbs were thin, posture listless. And then, the standing one looked up. Rachel gasped. Lily. She would have known that face in any light, in any world. The curve of the chin, the tilt of the head. Her daughter was alive. She pulled the binoculars back slightly, heart hammering. The second figure, was it Sophie? She leaned in again. Yes, curled under a blanket, unmoving, but there. Both of them, together. Elias, she breathed, they're there. I see them. He remained quiet, standing watch below. Write down what you see. Every detail. We'll need it. Rachel pulled out her notebook with trembling hands, drawing a quick sketch of the boat, the shoreline, the approximate position of the yacht in relation to the island's cove. She took photographs through the lens using her phone, though they were grainy and distant. She didn't care. This was real. Later that evening, she found Darren at the airfield hangar, arms greasy from engine work. When she showed him the photos, he stared for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. That boat's been in and out of this region for months, he said. No registry. No logs. Doesn't match any charter routes. When I asked Port Control about it, they said it was private diplomatic cargo. No one questions it. Rachel narrowed her eyes. What does that mean? It means someone's covering for it. And if that's the same yacht from the island, your daughters weren't just lost there. They were taken there. She didn't speak. Couldn't. Her entire body felt like a tuning fork hit by lightning. Darren folded his arms. We need to intercept that boat. We need someone with power on our side. Rachel whispered, I know who. The walls of the police station were thin, and Rachel had learned early not to trust them. Whispers died quickly in Port St. John's. So when Captain Massigo Dlamini invited her into his office and quietly locked the door behind him, she knew something was different. He didn't sit behind his desk. Instead, he stood by the window, arms folded, watching the street below. I saw the footage, he said at last. From your phone. The girls on the yacht. I believe you. Rachel, seated with her hands gripping the arms of the chair, exhaled for the first time in days. Then help me. Masigo finally turned to face her. Late 40s, sharp-eyed, with a face hardened by years of political compromise and moral dilemmas. But in that moment, his expression was resolute. I wanted to bring down this network for years, he said. But the web runs deep. Some of the names tied to Shark Rock Island? Untouchable. Parliament connections. International shell companies. No one wants this investigated. At least, not officially. So we do it unofficially, Rachel said. He allowed a brief smile. Not quite. We do it carefully. Masigo laid out the plan with precise clarity. It was a two-pronged operation, one public, one in the shadows. The first, an official inspection of Shark Rock Island under the pretext of a wildlife protection audit. Environmental law gave them a narrow legal window. A small unit, trustworthy officers only, would accompany him to inspect the site, drone included. Anything suspicious would be recorded. The second, a covert interception team posted at 3 potential exit harbors. If the yacht tried to make landfall, it would be stopped. No sirens, no lights. Quiet containment, identification of all passengers, and confirmation of the girls' identities. You're not just fighting traffickers, Masigo warned. You're fighting their protectors. If word leaks, the girls could vanish again before we even step onto a boat. Rachel's hands were trembling. And me? Where do I fit? He met her eyes, serious now. You go with us. To the island. You know your daughters. If we find them, we'll need confirmation. Fast. She nodded without hesitation. I'll be there. That evening, preparations began in secret. Rachel and Masigo met under the cover of night in an abandoned fisheries building. Inside, a weathered chalkboard was turned into a tactical map. The island's layout, the yacht's likely approach routes, satellite recon from Darren's connections, and shift schedules for coastal patrol. Darren joined them briefly, slipping in through a side door, cap low over his eyes. I can't fly you in, he said, but I can fly cover. Stay overhead, run distraction if needed. I'll radio the moment I see that yacht move. Rachel looked around the dimly lit room. A pilot, a captain, a mother. No backup, no headlines, just belief. Before dawn, Rachel packed a small rucksack. Photos of the girls, a medkit, spare clothes, and a simple gold chain Lily had left behind that awful day. She folded it into a soft cloth and whispered, "Hold on." She dressed in a uniform provided by Masego's team, a civilian volunteer badge attached to her collar. She caught her reflection in the mirror, tired, weathered, but unbreakable. As the convoy rumbled to life outside, she stepped into the back seat of an unmarked police van, flanked by 2 officers who had sworn to keep their mouths shut and their eyes open. She looked out the window as they turned onto the coastal road. The sky was softening. A new day was breaking. Rachel didn't know what waited on that island, but she knew this much. She was not leaving without her daughters. The wind howled off the sea, warm and restless. On a narrow bluff above Cliffshore Bay, Rachel crouched behind a ridge of sandstone, binoculars pressed to her eyes, hands shaking not from cold, but anticipation. Captain Masigo lay beside her, speaking in hushed tones into a shoulder-mounted comm. Team Delta. Do you copy? Visual confirmed. Target vessel approaching Easter Dock. From their vantage point, the scene below unfolded with eerie slowness. The same white yacht, sleek, silent, glided through the inlet toward the decaying wooden jetty. Shadows moved across its deck, men in dark uniforms. And then, 2 smaller figures were led toward the ramp. Rachel's heart nearly stopped. The girls were there. Lily and Sophie, her daughters, wrapped in oversized blankets, heads slumped forward. They were held up by 2 guards, their movements sluggish and unnatural. "Oh God," Rachel whispered, clenching the binoculars so hard her knuckles went white. They're drugged. She scrambled for her phone, switching to video mode, zooming in with trembling fingers. Down below, on the jetty, a third man emerged. He wasn't part of the crew. He wore a light police windbreaker, local jurisdiction badge on the chest. Sergeant Vuko, a name Masigo had mentioned only once, with caution. His reputation was murky. No one could prove anything, but everyone knew. Now, Rachel watched as Vuko approached one of the guards. Words were exchanged, casual, practiced. Then happened. The exchange. A thick, tan envelope, swollen with cash, passed from the guard's hand to the officer's. Vuko tucked it into his jacket as naturally as someone accepting a coffee. Rachel's phone recorded every frame. Masigo swore under his breath and tapped his body cam. Confirming corruption. Audio and video recording active. He whispered into the radio, "All units, hold position. We wait for the girls to be moved. We need both targets in custody, handler and buyer." The operation had shifted. What began as a recovery mission was now a sting. Rachel lowered her phone, face pale. "We have to get them now." Masigo didn't look away from the scope of his rifle. "If we go now, they vanish into the trees with the girls. We need them exposed. Trust me." Below, the guards gently laid Lily and Sophie onto a waiting SUV's back seat, shutting the doors with casual ease, as if they were delivering groceries, not children. But fate, it seemed, was on their side that day. The moment Vuko turned to speak to the driver, one of Masego's officers, Lieutenant Bika, stepped forward from the brush, disguised as a fisheries inspector. In seconds, the ambush began. Shouts, orders barked, guns raised. 3 guards were down in moments, surrendering as Masego's team surrounded the vehicle. Rachel bolted from the ridge, slipping down the sand trail like a landslide, legs flying beneath her. Masigo called after her, but she didn't hear. She reached the SUV before anyone else, flung open the rear door. Lily's eyes fluttered. Sophie stirred. They were there, alive, pale and sedated, but whole. Rachel fell to her knees, sobbing into their blankets, cradling both girls as the chaos swirled around her. Within minutes, handcuffs clicked onto Vuko's wrists. His smirk faded when Masigo played back the body cam footage. "You've just sold your career," Masigo said coldly. "No, Buko Matev. I just sold someone else's silence." Those words chilled everyone present. Rachel didn't care. Her daughters were safe. But as the sun dipped behind the cliffs and officers led the suspects into unmarked vans, a darker truth sank in. This was just one strand in a web, and it had only begun to unravel. The sea, once glinting in gold, now boiled beneath the storm-colored sky. The white yacht, once so silent and untouchable, was now surrounded. Masego's team moved fast. As the vessel tried to power away from the inlet, interception boats closed in from both sides. Warning shots fired into the water. Overhead, Darren's plane circled low, a presence that added pressure. "Cut the engine," barked one of Masego's officers over the loudspeaker. For a moment, it looked like the crew might resist. But when the second boat blocked their bow and agents boarded with tactical precision, the illusion of power crumbled. 2 guards lunged toward the stern, diving gear in hand. Escape attempt. They didn't get far. Intercepted mid-leap, they were dragged back onto the deck, cuffed and pinned. The remaining crew, 3 men in unmarked uniforms, were disarmed and forced to their knees. Masigo stepped aboard, Rachel close behind him. He nodded toward the cabin. "Search everything." Rachel didn't wait. Inside the yacht, the cabin was sterile, too clean. No personal items, just equipment, surveillance feeds, medical supplies, a single notebook with numbers and initials. Rachel moved quickly past the control room, into the lower deck, toward the passenger area. A door opened with a hiss of pressure. There, in a narrow berth lined with thin mattresses and bolted cabinets, lay 2 small figures under blankets. Lily, Sophie, They stirred faintly as light hit their faces. Rachel rushed in, sinking beside them. I'm here. You're safe. How about you now? Both girls were conscious, barely, eyes struggling to focus. Lily whispered something. Rachel bent low to catch it. He said, "We had to pretend, not be us." Sophie's hand clutched at her mother's sleeve with weak fingers. "I've got you," Rachel whispered. "You're not pretending anymore." Paramedics arrived within minutes. Masigo personally ensured the girls were evacuated by helicopter to the nearest regional hospital under full protection. Rachel didn't want to let go, but the medical team insisted. She kissed each girl's forehead and climbed back down onto the deck, heart aching, but hopeful. Then came the twist. "Captain," one of the officers called from below deck. "You need to see this." Masigo and Rachel followed the voice to a storage compartment cleverly concealed behind a panel in the rear. Inside, a small crate, padded, dark, with air holes drilled crudely into the sides. And inside it, a third child, a boy no older than 7, curled into himself, eyes wide, silent as a stone. His face was streaked with tears, his mouth covered with tape, removed moments earlier by the officer who had found him. Rachel's breath caught. "Who is he?" No one answered. He didn't speak, just looked up at them, blinking against the light. No ID, no belongings, just a serial tag on the crate like cargo. Masego's face darkened. "This isn't just a kidnapping. This is logistics." Rachel crouched beside the boy, gently holding out her hand. "You're safe now. No one's going to hurt you." The boy didn't move, but a tear slid down his cheek. Masigo turned to his team. "Get child services on the line. Notify Interpol. This just crossed into international crime territory." He looked at Rachel. "This isn't just about your daughters anymore." Rachel nodded slowly, eyes on the boy. "No," she whispered. "It never was." As the yacht was impounded and the officers secured every corner of the vessel, the full scope of the horror began to emerge. Documents, passports, forged visas, lists of ports. The yacht had been operating far longer than anyone imagined. And this child wasn't the first. He was simply the one who survived. The interrogation room was small, the air thick with sweat and silence. A single fluorescent bulb buzzed overhead, flickering slightly. Captain Masigo Dlamini stood across from the first suspect. One of the yacht guards, a thick-set man with a scar down his neck and eyes that refused to meet anyone else's. "Let me be clear," Masigo said, voice cold. "You were caught transporting 2 missing minors across protected waters. One unconscious, one hidden in a crate." The man shifted in his seat, but didn't respond. "You don't talk, you burn alone. You talk, you might still have a future." Still silence. Masigo opened a folder and placed 3 photographs on the table. "Lily, Sophie, the unknown boy. These are children. What's the price these days for a girl who can pass as someone's daughter? For a boy who doesn't speak?" That cracked something. The man leaned forward slowly and exhaled. "I don't know names, just codes. We take delivery from different points. Shark Rock is just storage. They stay 2, maybe 3 days. Then they're moved." "Where?" Masigo asked. "Depends. Madagascar, UAE, sometimes Europe, sometimes back here if the buyer's local." He tapped one of the photos, not unkindly. These 2 weren't meant to stay this long. Something changed. The revelations piled up fast. A second suspect, a lower-ranking crew member, confirmed the existence of a rotating network of holding islands, locations hidden beneath environmental licenses and dummy corporations. Shark Rock was one of 6 he'd personally seen. Children were funneled through by sea and air, scrubbed of identity, sometimes trained to act like they belonged to fake families. Rachel, watching behind the two-way mirror, gripped the edge of her chair. "They were erasing them," she whispered. Masego's team launched a full-scale investigation, opening sealed records and digital files recovered from the yacht. What they found was staggering. Forged passports, complete with fake parent data. flight itineraries showing movement of unaccompanied minors. Payment ledgers logged in code, but clearly linked to offshore accounts. Connections to two registered South African police officers, one of whom was Sergeant Vuko, already in custody. Within 72 hours, 5 people were arrested. 2 police officers, charged with obstruction of justice, conspiracy, and aiding human trafficking. 3 private security contractors, linked to a maritime logistics firm suspected of laundering illegal operations through cargo shipments. News of the arrests made national headlines. But the deeper story, the international trafficking ring, the usage of research islands as stopovers, was only beginning to reach the surface. Masigo stood before a press conference 2 days later, flanked by Rachel and representatives from Child Protection Services. "This wasn't a rescue," he said firmly. "This was the first breach in a system built to survive in silence." Meanwhile, Lily and Sophie remained in the hospital under round-the-clock care. The unknown boy, now identified as Jonas by a name scribbled on the inside of his shirt, had been moved to a trauma support center in Cape Town. He still hadn't spoken, but he now slept without flinching. Rachel visited her daughters every day, slowly piecing together their fragmented memories. "Mom," Lily whispered once, "they told us you gave us away." Rachel held her tightly, tears streaking down her cheeks. "Never. I never stopped looking." The white walls of the hospital were quiet, broken only by the soft beeping of monitors and the occasional squeak of a nurse's shoes down the corridor. Rachel sat beside her daughter's bed, one hand resting gently on Lily's, the other brushing the hair from Sophie's face. It had been 2 days since the rescue. 2 days since everything changed. And still, she hadn't dared to exhale. But now Sophie stirred. Her eyelids fluttered open, blinking under the pale fluorescent light. Then Lily groaned softly and turned her head. Both girls opened their eyes slowly, like waking from a nightmare that had gone on too long. "Mama." Sophie's voice was hoarse. Rachel leaned in, barely holding back tears. "I'm here, baby. I'm here." Lily reached for her, pulling her into a weak but desperate hug. "They said you'd never come." Rachel's heart cracked. They lied. Later, as doctors ran quiet tests and social workers reviewed their care plan, a trauma counselor gently asked the girls what they remembered. Lily looked down, voice barely above a whisper. "They made us say we were other kids. They gave us names, fake ones. They told us if we said who we really were, they'd hurt our mom." Rachel, sitting nearby, swallowed the lump in her throat. Sophie added, "They said we had a new family waiting, one we had to pretend to love." "They said you gave us away," Lily whispered. Rachel stood and knelt between their beds. "I didn't. Not for 1 second. I never stopped looking." Her voice cracked, but the truth in her eyes held steady. The girls cried with her, not out of fear anymore, but out of recognition and relief. By the end of the week, the story had exploded. International news outlets picked up the headline. "Sisters rescued from private island in South African waters. Child trafficking network exposed." Photos of Rachel reuniting with her daughters circulated around the world. The press called her a hero. Activists called her a symbol of motherly defiance. Anonymous sources began leaking documents. More names emerged. Interpol opened an international task force. But Rachel didn't care about headlines. She cared about the ones still missing. In a live interview, she spoke from the hospital's garden, daughters beside her. "I found mine," she said. "Now I'm going to fight for everyone who's still searching." Weeks passed. The island was placed under full lockdown by South African Special Enforcement. No boats allowed. No flights. Armed guards patrolled the once-abandoned dock. Investigators with ground-penetrating radar and forensic kits searched every inch of it. And yet, one morning, as the mist rolled in from the sea, a park ranger stationed on the cliff reported something strange. Through his binoculars, he saw a different yacht, sleek and silent, cutting across the horizon. It slowed as it approached Shark Rock, lingered just beyond the reef, and then, without docking, turned and vanished into the fog. By the time enforcement scrambled a drone, the vessel was gone. No signature, no flag, no radar ping, only a ripple in the water. In her apartment above the cafe in Port St. John's, Rachel looked out the window at the sea, her daughters finally asleep in the next room. She knew peace would never come easy, but now she had purpose. She opened a fresh notebook, wrote 3 words at the top. They're still out there. And then she picked up her phone and dialed Masigo. I'm not done, she said. And I know neither are they. He didn't argue. Because some stories don't end. They evolved. They hide. They wait to be found.